So I'm going to talk to you today about private wells, and I'm starting with these two pictures. The one on the right here is what a lot of people have in their mind as what wells look like. You know, the bucket where the pulley that you bring it up, and you know, the inside of it could be bricks, could be fieldstones, sometimes wood. But this is often the image that people have of wells. If you're getting a new well put in today, this is what it looks like. It's a steel casing that goes 20 feet into the ground, has sealants around it, a vermin-proof cap, and it has a well tag so that we can record where it's drilled through and learn more about the geology of the area. So it's very different the way that wells are constructed now compared to a while ago. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about groundwater and wells in Ontario. I'm going to talk to you about maintaining your well and what you should be doing as a well owner on a regular basis to keep your well in good shape, decommissioning wells, and then some of the programs and things that are going on in Ontario to help well owners. So in the world, it looks like when you look at a globe or an atlas, it's just completely blue, but 97.5% of that water is salt water. And we can't drink salt water. We haven't come up with a really cost-effective way to get the salt out of the water so that we can use it for drinking water. So the water we use is fresh water, and so that's a very small percentage of how much water there is in the planet. We have a lot of the fresh water is tied up as glaciers or in ice caps, so again, that's not available. So that leaves about 2% of the world's water for 6 billion people to be drinking. And when we look at where that's distributed, we see that most of the water, 95% of the fresh water available, is available underground. So in Ontario, we have lots of lakes and rivers and streams, but that's a very small percentage of how much water we have underground. We also have some statistics about wells in Ontario. So we have 750,000 registered wells in Ontario. A registered well is one that when the well driller constructs it, they file the record of what they drilled through and the depth of it, where they hit water, the type of water. That's all put into a registry with the Ministry of Environment. And it's been started in about 1910. The earliest well was registered in 1910, and it's been going on since then, and not all wells are registered, but we are getting quite a few in there. On top of the registered wells, there's wells that are constructed by people, you think about the turn of the century, and most people were digging their own wells. So those would not be registered wells. There's also some wells that have gone in from people who didn't necessarily have a license and didn't file the record. So there's an estimate of another 1.5 million wells out there. So a total of about 2.2 million wells in Ontario that are private wells. 10 to 20,000 new wells drilled each year. The majority of the wells that we see when we go out and do home visits are drilled wells. So somewhere between 58 and 70% of the wells we've seen in various studies are drilled wells. When we look at wells, though, invariably we see that most wells need some sort of repair. 89% of the wells that we've seen consistently need some sort of repair. It could be something as simple as a new well cap, or it could be a complete overhaul. But in general, people haven't been maintaining their wells proactively, and so most wells we see need something done to them. But if the well's maintained, the groundwater supply is going to be clean, sustainable, reliable supply. We just need to do a few things to keep it in good shape. So this is a picture showing you the 3 states of water. Water is so important to us. It makes up 70% of our bodies, but it's also one of the only elements that actually is present in all 3 forms: the solid, the liquid, and the vapor. This picture shows the solid, which is the snow, also form is ice, and the liquid, which is water, and then the water vapor, which is clouds. And it's all part of this water cycle. It's a continuous cycle that's been happening since the Earth first formed. There's no new water coming to the planet. The water is just moving through this cycle. As it cycles through this water cycle, it gets cleaned up, and we start to see that it filters through soil, it evaporates into the air, and that's how we get the water cleaned up again. So what we do with the water when it's in its liquid form or when it's on the Earth can really have an impact on the quality for other people and the length of time it takes before it's cleaned again. So we're going to start with the lake here, and the water gets heated up by the sun, it evaporates, goes into clouds, get enough water vapor together, and it condenses in clouds and it precipitates. It can either run off it can fill the streams or lakes or rivers, or it starts to percolate through and fill up our underground reservoirs. This shows you the different types of wells we have in Ontario. And over at our booth, and I think at the Lake Simcoe booth and in the children's section, there's a groundwater model which can help you understand this a bit more. But basically, this here represents a dug well. A dug well is an unconfined aquifer, which means there's no clay or hard rock layers that form between the Earth's surface and where the water-bearing zone is. In the spring, a water table well will often be a higher level than in the fall, so as it dries up over the year, the water levels drop in a dug well. And last year we had a lot of people calling us in late August, early September, and they'd lost their water supply completely because I guess their water was tapping into a very shallow water table well. This is a confined well, both of these are, and we see that it goes into a rock-bearing zone, and it is into an area that's under pressure. So when you drill the hole and pierce through that rock layer, it releases the pressure and the water rises within the well casing. Here it's on a hill, so it's in a high spot. Over here it's in a low spot, so it's continually flowing. Both of these are referred to as artesian wells, but a lot of people only think of the flowing wells as artesian wells. But any well that's under pressure like that, that's underneath one of these confining zones, is called an artesian well. This is a map showing us the registered wells in southern Ontario. So we see that it's a big mass of blue. Each little pinprick dot, right that, is a private well that's registered. So we see that what we do with our well can have an impact on other wells because they're getting pretty close together. And the well itself is maybe the biggest point of vulnerability in affecting those underground water supplies. So if the well's maintained, then that makes the groundwater supply sustainable. So one of the things that I was involved with was called a Sustainable Water Well Infrastructure Expert Panel Report. And what we looked at was a concept of how do we improve wells? What's the issues with private wells and how do we make them last longer? And so we started off by looking at the life cycle of the well. Most people think about the well on the day it's constructed. We think about it's being put in, we used the best guy in town, we got a good price, spent a lot of money on the well, and so we are pretty happy with the well. But often people forget about it after the well's installed, and during that functional life, things can just start to deteriorate. So this diagram, or this picture shows you a well that's finished below ground in a well pit. There's soil that's washed in, a snake, and some garbage. And so when you look at a well like this, you can see that the risks to this water quality are right in the well. The well itself is the biggest problem. If that well was maintained, if it was kept so that it was watertight, so that no garbage or soil or snakes were getting into it, you'd have a much better chance at having good water quality than if you have a well like this. So the expert panel concluded that wells that are not maintained, people who are not testing their water and not decommissioning wells at the end of the life cycle are the things that threaten the longevity of wells in Ontario. If we can get people to take action and keep their wells in good shape, then we're going to have long-lasting wells for generations. We just need to take a bit of action. And we care about this not just because it's your water supply that you're drinking and we want you to have a healthy supply, but that water underground is continually moving and it's going to affect other people. And we're looking a lot at municipal sources now, and often a private well has an impact on municipal supplies. So it's all about shared resources, and we want to take care of that shared resource. One of the things that WellWise did this year was a needs assessment, looking at some of the issues that are going on in people's minds about wells. So why aren't people doing a better job maintaining their wells? What kind of problems are people seeing? And how can we try to address those? So what we did was a needs assessment survey where we did 400 online surveys. We had people participate just filling in these 16-page online surveys, so pretty comprehensive. We did surveys at the plowing match. We had 346 people who dropped in a postcard with 4 questions that gave us a bit of information about their what they wanted to learn more about and who they go to for information. We had 6 focus groups in 3 different locations across the province, and we learned a lot about what's going on with wells in Ontario. So one of the big things we wanted to learn about is why aren't people maintaining their wells? And so we see that the different groups of people that we targeted in the surveys were, some were well technicians, some were well owners, and some were people who work with well owners, like through the health unit or through the Well Aware program or through the conservation authorities, and offer advice. And what we see the barriers are is lack of awareness, financial burden or cost. So it costs a lot of money to fix a well or to get a new well installed. And so it is a big issue when you find out you have a problem to have to address it and come up with that money. Some people said that there's a problem with availability of contractors. Not that there's not enough well drillers in Ontario, but there may not be enough people who specialize in fixing wells and decommissioning wells. And then other barriers that we had were things like poor advice from neighbors or for unlicensed professionals. So people are going and asking questions, but they're asking maybe the wrong person. But that came to the other barrier we had, which was that there's trust issues. Who do you tell what about your well? The well's been there for a long time. You haven't really been doing what you think you're supposed to be doing with it, and who do you tell that's not going to somehow compel you to do something very quickly, and that's going to be challenging, or who's going to have the authority to close your well off? So it's all these things compounded is what's led to the situation we have with wells in Ontario. So what do we see when we go out and look at wells? We've got some pictures here that demonstrate some of the wells that we saw. So these are all examples of older well designs which are kind of vulnerable to things getting into them. So here's a well pit that has hay around it. It's in a barn. Here's a hand pump well that has the wooden top. And again, this is stuff that people could either walk over or could fall into. That wishing well design is one that tends to be a great place for mice to live. Fieldstone wells and brick-lined wells. All of these do not do a good job of filtering the water. You want the water coming in from the bottom of the well, not leaking in from the sides to the top. So a watertight casing and cap are essential to keep that water clean. These are bad well locations. So when a well is being put in, the well is set back 50 feet from anything that can have an impact on the water quality. But these ones have all had some alterations after the well went in, and it's caused some considerations for the water quality. So here we've got a dug well in a horse yard. We've got a well pit right by in a garden and where the dog's hanging out. This one, they built a retaining wall, and the entire area was flooded for 2 years. Then they started to get bacterial counts. This one, the area was built up with stones. And here we've got a driveway and a garden. And the issue with the driveway and the garden is for, you know where it is, and you maintain your vehicle, but you think about when the snow comes, and you think about somebody who's not familiar with your driveway who backs up, and we've seen a lot of wells that have been completely destroyed by somebody backing a car up into it and dislocating the casing. And these are the common problems that we heard people identifying with their wells, the well owners. And what they said was that things keep falling into the well. Now, things falling into the well is a definite sign of a structural problem with the well. The well is structurally sound. You shouldn't be getting snakes or mice or chipmunks or debris in it. In drilled wells, it's insects. Often we get a lot of insects like spiders and cocoons forming in the well, and that drops into the water and creates a coliform count. So having a proper vermin-proof cap can really improve that. The other issue we heard a lot about was iron in the water. So you can see this water is orangey brown, and it's pretty unpleasant to have that as your water source. And so we see that minerals in water is something people are identifying, but sometimes that mineral can be an iron-reducing or a sulfur-reducing bacteria. So it's more of a slime than it is a mineral issue. So understanding the difference between iron-reducing bacteria and iron the mineral is one of the big steps that we're trying to educate people about. And this well here, it's a well that had run out of water, and then the water was filled with a large tanker truck, and it eroded the base of the well and caused some undermining. And then in the spring this year, when there was so much water around, the entire area collapsed. So it's an issue of running out of water. A lot of people aren't getting enough supply for their home, and they're coming up with other measures to try to figure out how to supplement their supply. To Testing your water is an important way to maintain your well, and this is something that I've been working with for a dozen years now. It was part of my PhD work with sampling well water for different types of elements, and we find consistently that the most commonly found thing in well water is bacteria. So bacteria is the thing that's going to show you changes in your well. It's going to tell you if there's insects or surface water getting into your well, so it's really important to be testing for that regularly. And the private well surveys that have been done in Ontario, there's been two, one in the 1950s, one in the 1990s. The one in the 1950s found 14% were high for nitrate, which is a form of nitrogen that moves with water. So when it gets to groundwater, it doesn't really dissipate. It stays, sometimes can accumulate in certain types of aquifers. So we had 14% in the 50s, 14% nitrate in the 1990s. Bacteria was 15% in the 50s, went to 34% in the 90s, and the 91-92 survey also looked at pesticides and found that only 6 wells in Ontario had pesticides in them. So pesticides is a surface water issue more than a groundwater issue, but looking at nitrate and bacteria on a regular basis is a way of understanding if your well is protected or not. With the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, they had a water testing program until a few years ago, and they found bacteria, nitrate, and sodium are the most commonly found impurities in well water. So sodium is often coming from your softener, or it can be coming from certain rock deposits or from road salt. So to keep your well in good shape, you want to keep the casing watertight, you want to keep the cap watertight, and it seems like pretty obvious advice to keep the area clean and safe, but these are another examples. So this one is a well in the middle, there's no cap, and the area is completely flooded. That's going to be likely to have a negative impact on the water quality. Here we've got, again, no cap, and the area is surrounded with gardens that manure is spread on. So you want to keep that area right around your well protected. Keep it clean so that you're more likely to have clean water. And here, instead of a well cap, they've put a piece of wood into the well. So these are all very obvious problems, but having a watertight casing and cap are some very simple things you can do to keep your well in good shape. On top of that, there's some things in the geology and soil that help you understand your risks. And so there may be nothing you can do to change your soil and geology, but it helps you understand how vulnerable or how protected your water supply is. If you have a well record, it tells you the layers that they drilled through, and you can help to understand if there's any of those confining or protective layers. So the study that I did looked at bacterial contamination, and we found that where you had a shallow soil profile over fractured rock, that's where we saw a lot of bacterial contamination. And that's often because there isn't an opportunity for it to get filtered before it hits the water supply. Where you had a thick soil profile and you had a confining layer, and on the well record it would be something like a hard pan, a shale, a thick clay layer, or a rock layer, that's where we saw that they were less likely to have bacteria. And that's because this layer isolates what's going on at the surface from what's going on below and protects that water supply. So this is what we like to see our wells looking like if you're putting in a new drilled well or a new dug well. You want to have 20 feet of sealant or 10 feet of sealant if it's a dug well. And that sealant makes sure that that area around the well is not a shortcut that the water uses as it's percolating through the water supply. You want to see it finish 16 inches above ground with a vermin-proof cap. And you want to see the area tapered away so that way there's no puddles that form right around your well. And this is a picture of the proper drilled well. And this is showing you some of the incidents that we've seen where a poorly maintained well has become a safety concern. So here we've got Ontario firefighters rescue a girl trapped in the well. We've got a donkey that was trapped in a well. This is Jessica McClure. This was a Nobel Prize winning photo in the 1980s. And it shows a little girl that had been trapped in the well for 2 days, and as she's being rescued. And here's a little boy who was trapped in a well for 27 hours. So it's very much a safety concern when you have a well that's not maintained, and you may know where it is and you don't walk on top of it, but others might not know where it is. The other issue is it's an environmental issue when you have a well that's not maintained. Things get in through the casing. So here we've got a fieldstone lined well, and we've got material from the septic system and an oil tank leaching into that fieldstone lined well, gets down into the aquifer, moves with the water, and now it's affecting this other well. So it's definitely going to affect other wells in the area. It could affect your own well, and so it's a better situation to have it closed off if you're not using it. When you're closing it off, the vertical migration has to be stopped. So it's not just a matter of filling with rocks or filling with scrap metal. It's a matter of making sure that the area is closed off so that it's no longer an issue for generations to come. So this is walking you through some photos that show you the proper way to decommission a well. This is a well pit that is being decommissioned. The day before they did this, they went and they disinfected the water. So they pump out a full volume of the well water, and then they disinfect it overnight so that it's clean water that's left in the aquifer. Now they're removing the pump equipment here. It's being pulled out, and they're forming a trench to allow things to flow away. This is a tremie pipe. A tremie pipe is just a plastic pipe that hooks up to a grout pump here. And the grout pump pumps the proper formula of grout into the well and forces the water up. Here we've got the water being pushed upwards, which means that that grout that's being pumped in is displacing it. When you get the grout to the surface like that, it means that entire column has been filled with those sealants. So you know that there's no voids or gaps that would allow problems to settle. So this is a fully sealed well now. This is another way that they put it in, is with the hole plug. The hole plug is a large size bentonite chip that swells slowly so that way it doesn't form bridges or gaps that would be harder to fill. And then here's another one with sort of a concrete pouring truck. But when you're doing it, the contractors know how much material is needed. They know exactly how much depth they expect to fill. So a bag like this in a 6-inch diameter casing fills 3 feet. They're constantly measuring. If it's filled 13 feet, they know they've got something stuck on the sides, and they break it up so they can have a full seal. And then the material at the top, so this is the well pit. The well pit here is removed, and the top 6 to 10 feet is removed. So at the surface, there should be nothing visible when the well's been decommissioned properly. And the area is then landscaped, and you can do anything you want over a properly sealed well. That area is now as protected or more protected than the surrounding ground. So when we talk to people about what are the solutions to getting people to maintain wells, one of the big things was education. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the educational efforts. The other was regular and free water testing. So the bacterial test, everybody likes that from the health unit, but they also felt that if nitrate and sodium are showing up, it'd be nice to have those things be available as free tests also. And then funding for well work, because it's a big ticket item sometimes when you hadn't been budgeting for it and all of a sudden you have to get that. Just following up on the funding issue, here we've got a map of southern Ontario. The different colors represent different levels of funding that is available for well work. For farmers, the Environmental Farm Plan will pay 50% of the cost of an upgrade or a decommission. And for non-farmers, then you need to talk to your conservation authority. And there's programs in place in most conservation authorities that will help with the cost of upgrading a well. But what we heard over and over again is that not only do these funding programs help people take action immediately, but it raises awareness. And it needs to be something that's available across the province so that anybody living anywhere has an opportunity to take advantage and improve their situation. We also heard that for decommissioning wells, closing them off, it's hard to get people moving on that issue. It's something that the greater the level of funding, the more likely you are to get people to take action. And that's going to be what's going to be really determining whether people decommission wells. Is if you have a high level of funding, some said 90, some said 100%, people will identify those wells and make sure that they're done properly. If you don't, then it's going to be harder for people. So just briefly telling you about some of the resources available. The Wellwise Resource Centre is a province-wide organization. We're available for technical support about wells. If you have any questions, you can either talk to us at the booth today or you can contact us. We're based in Orono, but we're available to help people across the province. We have a water testing program we did a year of research trying to figure out the best packages for rural well owners. And there is a fee for these packages, but we did do research for over a year to figure out the best prices. Price you're paying is going to the lab, not to us. We're just facilitating the thing. And then we have interpretation so that most people get the results back. Doesn't mean a lot to them. So we compare with the drinking water standards and we'll help you understand if it's a health concern or if it's something that is just an aesthetic concern, and you can make a choice whether it's something you want to treat or not. We also do soil testing with that. And this is for people familiar with the OFA testing program. This program replaces the OFA program. We are also working with the Green Communities Canada and do the Well Aware program, which is an educational program. And one of the program's elements that I work with a lot is the home visit. And it's basically a 2-hour tutorial where people learn about their well, learn about the area around their well, how to keep it protected, and then they look at their septic. And this is where we found that 89% of the wells needed a repair, a third of the people test their water for bacteria, 90% never test beyond bacteria, 20% of the people had a well needing to be decommissioned, and half the people that we talked to needed to pump their septic system. So there's lots of people at the same situation that just need a little bit of a motivation to take action, and these visits are a free, confidential visit. Michelle Locke and Michelle Huddlin at Severn Sound Environmental Association do the visits in this area, so if you're interested in a visit, then talk to them. And this is a program we're bringing to Elmvale on Monday. We have 18 volunteers. We're going to be going out to farms, installing a sign that marks the well location to help remind people about the importance of taking action in the area right around the well. Keep that area protected. We provide a free water test to the people who are participating, and we provide them with a free resource package. And this is something that we're doing with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, some stewardship councils in Eastern Ontario, and it was started in Quebec about 6 years ago. And we have a children's program that we've done so far in Durham Region and Oxford County. And we go into schools and we do a 2-hour scripted program where we teach kids about the water cycle and wells. And we have a new website that we're developing this year. It's going to have really comprehensive information about wells, upgrading, decommissioning, maintenance.